Folks, today you're going to learn that the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus are not real. I'm going to show you that the story you've been told about what happened in Iran over the past 2 weeks is absolute complete bullshit. Okay? Now, a lot of people think that Iran has a stated goal to destroy the Israelis. And I certainly listed it here, but notice how I listed it number 4. I'll show you in a second why. Okay? So the number one, and this is by order of importance, the number one goal of the Iranian regime ever since 1979 to 2025 is to survive, not to lose power. The number two goal is to have clout in the international stage to impact decision making, which they haven't been able to do because they've basically been boycotted by the West. Number 3 is to remove sanctions so they can actually use their oil money to grow their economy, which they can't since they're sanctioned. And of course, number 4, eliminate the clout that the Israelis have in the region. Now, that is because the biggest threat to goals 1, 2, and 3, but mainly 1, is the United States. And since the United States is pretty much the only threat to the survival of the Iranian regime, since, as you've seen, the people of Iran are not in the position to overthrow these guys, right? The only ones who can come in and clean this up is the US. So Iran basically has to get the United States out of the Middle East, away from Iran as much as possible. Now, if the United States has their own forward base in the Middle East that is heavily militarized and badass, and can really fight well, which is Israel, okay? So Israel is a dominant regional force. It is representative of US interests. So Iran is pushing against Israel mainly because it is an extension to the United States, and Iran is trying to push the US away to get some distance so they can survive. And also, if you weaken the Israelis, well, the US clout in the region also goes away, which means Iran can forward their interests and actually get influence on Saudi Arabia, the other Gulf countries, etc., etc. So there is definitely, with Israel, this kind of combined use. Number one, they have to push Israel out and weaken it as much as possible to eliminate or diminish US influence, but also it's an internal PR move because their own population needs a common enemy, somebody to hate. And with their religious, theological, Shia, the Jews, Israel is such a good villain for them to have. So they've been using it for the past 50 years to push this narrative. Do I believe that they would love to destroy Israel? Sure, they would love to destroy Israel, right? They certainly hate it, but it's not their top priority. Their top priority is survival, and Israel is just a side effect of that. They're using it internally to get people kind of rallied, and also using it in order to push the US away from the Middle East, okay? But if that's your stated goals, if it's survival, clout, and sanctions, the way to achieve these goals is basically to get a nuke, okay? If they get a nuke, right, it's very, very simple. If Iran gets a nuke, what can you do if you want to screw with them? Not a lot, right? Not a lot, because if they've got a nuke, well, it's like North Korea. Nothing you really can do, right? Now, they have tried to get a nuke, but because they understand the implications of going full-blown balls deep and get an actual nuke, which might start a proper regional war and might bring down the US on their head, and they might actually lose their own regime, what they've actually switched up to over the past few years is to do this, to become a threshold nuclear country. Now, that is a different strategy, basically saying, look, obviously, even our allies, the Russians and the Chinese, are not happy with us getting a full-blown nuke. Definitely not the US, definitely not the Israelis, right? So let's go for 60% enriched uranium, which is definitely weapons-grade uranium. Anything about 3.5% is weapons-grade uranium, right? But let's keep it at 60% for now so that we can negotiate and we can say, hey, the United States, we are literally just, a spit away from a nuke. So we deserve your respect. And we deserve your respect in the matters that are important to us, which is don't meddle with our regime, open up the sanctions, and let us have a seat at the table, right? And they will negotiate this, right? Their objective is basically survivability, no sanctions, and a seat at the table, and potentially kind of countering the Israeli dominance in the Middle East. If they have a parity with the Israelis on weapons, well, the US has less influence and they feel less threatened, so et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Now, obviously, the United States is not happy about it because at the end of the day, a nuclear Iran and a threshold nuclear Iran are both really, really bad options, right? Because they threaten the allies in the region, Saudi and UAE and the Israelis, and basically it's giving a nuke to these crazies. It's a very, very dangerous thing to have, and also it means, you know, you kind of have to give up on a lot of this stuff and kind of share the Middle East with the Iranians, which they don't want to do. Now, the United States definitely does not want to share the Middle East with the Iranians. They're a bunch of crazies, and they're certainly not going to be allowed back in the table. Nobody's going to lift up sanctions, etc., and the regime change is definitely a possibility. So the US is not happy with either of these options, not a nuke and not a threshold state. So the US is trying to negotiate for years with the Iranians to figure out a solution where they can have some uranium, but not to enrich it above 3.5%, which is basically plausible as a civilian use of nuclear energy. That's obviously bullshit because there's so much oil. Why would they need nuclear energy? But you know, at 3.5%, you kind of keep a safe distance. You give them some enrichment, but not enough to mandate the actual objectives. Okay. Now, the problem with this whole story starts here. So we're now in 2025, right? Now, the negotiations have been going on for a couple of years. We had a deal done with Obama. The deal got canceled by Trump. And Trump kind of campaigned on a few things, which is stop the war in Ukraine, stop the war in Gaza, bring down the interest rates, and stop Iran from getting a nuke, right? Now, right now, Trump doesn't really have a lot to show for going closer and closer to the midterms because the Fed is not dropping rates. Ukraine war isn't over, not even close, even though he reprimanded Zelensky in front of everybody, didn't work. Gaza war is still not over, so he basically has one thing that he can kind of lean towards the midterms, because if they lose the midterms, he's a lame duck, right? So he's now basically going all in on this Iran thing, saying, okay, Iran, okay, I'm not acceptable with this 60% enrichment. I wouldn't be comfortable with that. I'll give you 3.5% civilian enrichment with oversight, with inspectors, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Iran says, no way, Jose, right? And then Trump says, you know what? I don't have any time. The midterms are coming up. I need to push this because they're going to be dicking me around for years, right? So I'll give you 60 days. 60 days to solve this, okay? If we don't solve this in 60 days, I don't know what I'm going to do. Of course, they continue to dick him around because they're used to what happened with the Biden administration, right? And then what ends up happening is the 60-day period, it passes through, and then Trump has to make a decision, basically, and he says in the verbiage of Montgomery Burns, release the hounds! And then he releases the hounds, in this case, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israelis, on the Iranians, right? Now, he uses Bibi Netanyahu to hurt Iran, because hurt he did, right? He takes no price in that endeavor at all. No U.S. casualties, no U.S. damage, no U.S. risk. If this thing would have went south, he would have said, it's not me, it's Bibi, it's not me. If Bibi wins, he wins, right? So Bibi takes on all the risk, but luckily for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis, this risk ends up paying off, okay? They managed to basically beat Iran strategically, and the risk pays off beautifully. And now, basically, the whole risk of thousands of dead Israelis and all this stuff doesn't really happen. They have about 40 casualties, some buildings, etc., etc. But now he's winning. The risk he took playing that hand didn't pan out, and he managed to win a lot of money in the poker example. And now he wants to leave without money. He doesn't want to continue playing because he's up a lot, right? Okay, that's fine. On the other hand, right, let's look at this picture right here. When Benjamin Netanyahu said, I'm going for this, and I know you're using me, Donald, right? I know you're using me to push around Iran, that's fine. I'll take the bait, and I'll take on the risk. Whatever happens, you know, he took a gamble, and he won, but that's fine. But I'm going to try and get something done here. And what he's done is three very impressive things. Number one, he eliminated all the old school generals from the Iranian chain of command, all the people that came from the revolution, the old guard, the hawks, the ones that made no business with the US or the Israelis, the West. And now they're going to be replaced with more younger, pragmatic people that might be more open, probably more open to doing business, even though they don't really be friends, but more pragmatic people to work with, and potentially even weaker, which might, in 5 to 10 years, push the regime to the brink of collapse, okay? The entire old guard is gone. The new people we might want to be working with, because they're going to be more pragmatic, but maybe it even leads to a collapse, et cetera, et cetera. This is a good thing, right? Then he says, well, look, I'm also going to hurt your nuclear plan. I'm going to hurt your ballistic missiles plan. I'm going to kill your air defenses. I'm going to get a lot of intelligence. I'm going to hurt the IRGC, and I'm going to hurt the besieged. And maybe in 5, 10 years, that's going to pan out also. In the sense of potentially the people of Iran actually overthrowing this regime. But in any case, I'm going to push your military and your whole strategic thing into a corner, which he did. And then he's also going to demonstrate his power in the Middle East, saying, hey, look, I'm the bully here, which means the Saudis are dying to make a deal now with the Israelis. The only reason the Saudis wanted to make that deal is because the Israelis are kind of the guard dog. If you're building a Middle East defense pact, it's the Saudis and the Israelis with the US backing against Iran, right? But also, the Abraham Accords open up a lot of money. There's going to be an economic corridor with oil flowing all the way from Saudi to the Israelis and then to Europe. They're going to be drowning in oil money. So you're going to have the Middle East Defense Pact, money from oil between these 3 countries and the US and Trump, and isolating Iran, pushing it away from the Gulf countries. This is a beautiful setup. This is the perfect score for Bibi. Bibi right now, he's like, chef's kiss, I got everything done. We have a lot of casualties, like 40 people died. That's horrible, that's tragic, but not thousands of people dead. And we achieved every single one of our goals. Changing the regime was never a goal of Bibi. It's impossible. It's impossible. The Israelis can't do it. Killing the nukes completely, 100%, is also not attainable for Benjamin Netanyahu. So whatever he could, he got out of this. And now he wants out. Now Trump basically did this. He said, look, I need some leverage in the negotiation over Iran. Okay? So I'm going to set the Israelis. Okay? Now, what I don't want beyond a better deal, I don't want a regional war. Certainly not. I don't want any US boots on the ground. I don't want China and Russia getting involved. No, 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 no. And I don't want to hurt the Israelis too much because we need them. Okay? Now, the Israelis come out and they attack Iran. If they fail, that's an off-ramp for Trump to say, hey, not mine. The Israelis went rogue, right? But the Israelis actually have a high degree of win. So basically, if it's a boxing match, the Israelis are killing it by points. Not a complete knockout, but a huge points win, right? And now, Trump gives them an off-ramp. He made sure that no side got humiliated, that both sides got hurt plenty, so they want to, both sides do not want to fight anymore. They both got hurt pretty bad. Both did not get humiliated too much in the point you can still off-ramp, and his own backed fighter, which is the Israeli, is leading by points. So from this point on, everything that you saw was complete theater. It was complete bullshit. Allow me to explain. Okay? Complete bullshit. Okay? So Trump gives notice to the Iranians saying, hey, folks, I'm going to bomb Fordo and whatever the fuck you've got there, clear out, right? And then he ends up bombing empty buildings. There's footage of like trucks going into Fordo, clearing things out of there a couple of days before the bombing, right? Now, my pen just dropped. Doesn't matter because I got another one. So it's a huge PR win for Donald because the President of the United States gets to show force in the Middle East, which the Biden administration didn't do. They get to show, don't fuck with us. They get to show the B-2, how good it is. 40 hours in the air, nobody knew what the fuck they were. And they get to showcase the new bunker busters, etc., etc., etc. Huge PR win, even at home, for his own base. And he gets to avoid this whole boots on the ground thing, right? Now, the response from Iran was completely orchestrated. It's been coordinated in advance. They bomb a bunch of sand dunes around the El Udeid base in Qatar. Basically, Trump ignores this. They can save face. And the next day, Trump announces peace. A ceasefire, peace deal, that's it. It's finished. So Trump is basically saying, okay, I got what I wanted out of this. Let's get the fuck out before it explodes in our face, okay? And it's trying to kill this event. Okay, now Trump basically uses both sides to hurt each other. So they don't want to go anymore. So both want out of this, okay? Now, he basically forces peace. Both sides get to use their rhetoric on how to sell this peace to their own base. The Iranians say, well, we don't agree to this peace. We're not going to be told what to do, but if the Israelis stop firing, we'll stop firing. And then Bibi uses his usual excuse, which every Israeli PM used in the past, which is, Trump just made me. I wanted to keep going, but Trump stopped me. And now the war is over. Okay, but now the real question that Trump will have to face is, he's done all that, everything worked perfection. How good is the new deal with Iran is going to look like? Because at the end of the day, the Israelis and the US have no way to stop the Iranian nuclear program unless they put boots on the ground, which the US will never do. It's not going to happen after Iraq. The second option is supervision, which means a deal. Okay? So, the question of this new deal, now that Trump brings back the Iranians to the negotiating table after get shellacked by the Israelis for a couple of weeks, can we get a better deal? Where's the red line going to be? 3.5% or 60%? Big question, right? And what is the extent of the supervision they're going to allow as far as boots on the ground from inspectors? Because if this basically backfires, right, the Iranians might say, well, look, we're going to square one. We're calling you bluff. You're not going to bomb us again. It's over. We're going to basically do whatever we did so far, which is basically stall, right? Or they can go to square -1 and say, we're going to accelerate our nuclear program because of what you've done, and basically run towards an actual nuke. In that case, it's just a question of how credible Trump's threats are, because Trump already said, look, if they're going to run to a nuke, we're going to bomb them again, okay? He literally said that. So the question is, do they believe? Do they want to fuck with Trump? They know the Israelis are not going to attack again. That thing is over. But now the question is, can Trump get this 3.5% and below enrichment with extensive supervision? If yes, this whole drill was perfect. It didn't cost any American lives. Just some fuel and some bombs, but that's it. The Israelis took most of the pain, most of the risk, and he gets away with this. Beautiful. If not, if we get 1 or -1, which is a complete bluff and the continuation of the stalling or acceleration, then this was a very unsuccessful exercise. But what you've seen, this theater with the bombing on Fordo and so forth, that's a bunch of bullshit. You just need to wrap up the war so they can go to the actual thing, which is Trump wanted to leverage Iran into a better deal. He needed the Israelis to create that leverage. Now, let's see him, the art of the deal, use the leverage to get a better deal. Watch the quality of the deal, not the noise and the smoke around you. If you want to support this channel, patreon.com/TomNashReport. Would love to see you there. We have some extensive work coming on, exclusive there, to show you guys some love, some articles, some inside, in-depth stuff I can't put here on YouTube. Thank you so much. I'll see you next one. Peace.